The fourth and final idea before we get to questions is I think probably the most important, which is the key to happiness. And I've spent a lot of time over the years, studying these great investors, and some of them, are multi-billionaires, and you're trying to figure out, are they happy? What does the money buy them? What makes their lives worthwhile? And I was in a very privileged position because I got to see this up close, and so I got to see when actually they were really pretty unhappy, and you could look in the eyes of certain investors, whether it's a Tom Gaynor or a John Spears or a Monish Pabre, and you'd be like, this guy has a kind of glow to him, and why? Where does that come from? Why is this person more fulfilled than some of the other investors? And so the reason we have this photograph of Irving Kahn is that in some ways he kind of embodies this sort of deeper wisdom about what life is about. This photo of Kahn was taken when he was 108 years old. He was one of 4 siblings, all of whom lived to over 100. It's an astonishing thing. And what's even more astonishing is he smoked until he was about 50. I'm not necessarily advocating this, and ate red meat always. And so his son Tom, who worked with him for many years, was in his 70s, said to me, he stayed young because he just always studied. He just was always learning constantly. So it was sort of he had a youthful mind until the very end. So a few months, actually maybe 6-8 weeks before Irving Kahn died, I had this very strange interview with him where I was hoping to meet with him in person, and he was too sick to meet me, and I was initially very disappointed. And then his grandson, Andrew, who's an analyst in his 30s at Kahn Brothers, at his investment firm, is a really lovely bloke, takes my questions that I've written out and asks these questions to his grandfather, whom he adored, over several days, and writes out answers. And when I get these answers back, there's something sort of deeply moving about them. This is sort of the lifelong wisdom of a 108-year-old man. And so one of the key questions I said to him, when you look back on your life and you think about not just the key to a long life, an extraordinarily long life, but actually a happy life and a meaningful life, a fulfilling life, what is it? What can we learn from you? And he said, this is a very hard question to answer, and it's different for everyone. But he said, for me, family is very important. And when I asked him what made him happy, what made him look back on his 108 years with happiness and a sense of pride and fulfillment, he said the things that were important were happy, healthy family members, the fact that he'd built a company that he was proud of, that he'd created something. And the third thing he said was that he'd met people who were smarter than him, who could give him the answers. Because he said there are certain mysteries in life that you just can't solve on your own, and sometimes you have to stop and you have to ask for directions. And so when you look at the things, and I'm pretty sure that the person he was referring to above all was Ben Graham, who was a lifelong friend of his. And he was actually his teaching partner in the 1920s. So here you're looking at a guy who lives to 109, and the things that he's emphasizing, it's not, I had a Maserati. It's learning, it's family, it's health, it's wisdom. And his son and grandson said the only thing he ever truly craved, really, in terms of physical objects, was books. They would take him to a French restaurant, fancy French restaurant, and he would order chopped steak or a hamburger. He just was totally not interested in anything flashy. So I thought that was very revealing. I had a very interesting interview with John Spears from Tweedy Brown. He's an extraordinary guy, again, with a real glow in his eye, someone you feel has figured stuff out. And he was telling me about this apartment that he had bought in Florida, which cost him, I think, $5 million. And he doesn't like to have a lot of risk. He doesn't like to have a lot of stress in his life, so he paid for it in cash. And he said to me, I felt like kind of a big shot. He's like, it was the biggest apartment in the building, and I was the only one who had 2 apartments that I put together. And he said, and so he was very funny about it. He's like, so I had this sort of sense of my own importance. And then he said, when he thought about it more, what he realized was actually the importance was that his kids and his grandkids could come stay there with him, that it was big enough. And he said to me, investors are always talking about return on investment, return on assets, return on invested capital. And he said, this is a return on life. And I thought it was a very beautiful kind of poetic phrase, and it's an important way, I think, to look at your money. There's got to be a return on life, and this isn't. I'm not trying to be self-righteous about this. This isn't a moral thing. It's like it's what works. You know, Munger always says he looks at other people and figures out what works and what doesn't work, and so you're looking at these people like Kahn and Spears and Gaynor, who are very charitable, who are very philanthropic, who are very family-oriented, and they're actually happier. And I think that's a very revealing thing. So, finally, I would mention Monish Pabraj, who has spoken here before. And Monish kind of embodies this attitude. He's thought very deeply about this stuff. And Monish is a very brilliant guy, right, and a very brilliant investor. And you know, I went with him to India recently, and he was talking about how he was a lousy student as a kid, and then they did a bunch of testing on him, and they said, oh yeah, by the way, you have an IQ in the 180s. So this is an incredibly smart guy. I mean, he has a really good engine, and he's figured out how to kind of stack the odds in his favor so he wins this particular game of investing. But the thing that Monish is going to be remembered for, and he's very conscious of this, is not his hedge fund, however good the returns are. It's actually this charitable foundation that he set up, which is very extraordinary, which is called the Dakshana Foundation. And Dakshana is a Sanskrit word for gift. And I had the opportunity to go recently with Monish over Christmas, to spend several days in India with him. And so I went around to look at the charity up close and to see what it did. And what Dakshana does that's very extraordinary is it takes some of the cleverest teenagers in India, but these are people from very, very poor backgrounds. Some of them are from families that are untouchables, from very poor rural areas. And he gives them 2 years of free coaching to take the exam to the Indian Institutes of Technology, which, as many of you will know, is the Indian equivalent of MIT. And this totally and utterly transforms their lives. If you get into IIT, your prospects in life and the prospects of your whole family are just transformed. And IIT has an acceptance rate of less than 2%. Dakshana graduates, 54% of them have got in so far. It's an astonishing thing. And again, it's Monish figuring out, how do I win this game? What are the things that we can do that can make our students do really well in this exam? And I had this, and so the latest count, I think 888 of these graduates had got in. And I had this wonderful experience in India where I was in Pune, where I met I met a lot of the graduates. One of them particularly stuck out, he was kind of the star of the Dakshana Foundation graduates. He had come top of all of them in the national exams. He'd come 63rd out of more than 500,000 people in this exam, and had gone to IIT Bombay, which is the hardest to get into. And then he gets this job at a great tech company, goes to work in London, and recently came, a month or so recently came to work in California. And I said to this guy, were your parents smart? And, you know, because I knew that he lived in a very, very modest home, a very modest area. And he said, yeah, my father's incredibly smart. He said he was a superb mathematician. And, you know, but he never had an opportunity to use it. And he spent his life, you know, he makes a very modest salary as a tailor. And one of the first things that this guy had done with his money after he gets this tech job is he buys a house for his parents. And so he moves them out of their very, very modest house into a new house. And as I'm thinking about this story, I'm thinking, what an amazing thing that Monish has taken his skill at playing a game, and he's totally transformed hundreds of lives in this way. And that this young guy has figured out, actually, the first thing I want to do is to transform my parents' life, not my life when I get the money. And the thing that's more amazing about this is that guy is in this room now. And it's Ashok who's here. And so the company that Ashok went to work for is actually Google. And so Ashok went to work after graduating from Dakshana, went to work for Google in London, recently came here as a software engineer in the search area for Google here in Mountain View. So you're seeing here the fact that Monish has been able to take this extraordinary skill, this extraordinary brain, this ability to stack the odds in his favor in life, and actually use it to have this tremendous impact on other people. And I don't think this is because Monish is some sort of righteous figure. I think it's he's a lovely guy. He's a great guy. I love spending time with him. But I think what he's figured out is is this is what works. He's like, if I'm to have a really happy and fulfilled life, it's not going to come because I have, you know, a yacht. It's actually going to come because I figured out how to help other people and how to make other people's lives more complete. And so the thought that I would leave you with is just that you should think about your dakshana. What's your gift, and how do you take your particular gift that you have? You know, you're all incredibly smart people. How do you take your abilities and figure out, what do I do with this to make a difference in other people's lives? And I think you do this not because you're necessarily Mother Teresa or Gandhi. It's because you're tilting the playing field in your direction. You're stacking the odds in your favor so that you can have a happy and successful and meaningful life. Thank you.